He's now a peace campaigner and supports the work of WikiLeaks. I spoke to him earlier, and I began by asking him what public interest was being served by the release of all this information.
Well, first of all, there's been quite a misdescription of what has actually happened over here. WikiLeaks has actually put on its website, as I understand, only about 100 cables out of 260,000. That's hardly indiscriminate. In other words, the notion that they have dumped all of this onto the web is actually false, as anyone can find if they are able to get through to the WikiLeaks website.
I guess what's surprising in a way is that you're known for releasing the Pentagon Papers. You had a real motivation behind that. There was evidence in those papers that presidents had lied to the American people about how many lives were going to be lost. It's hard to see that kind of motivation in making all of these documents available. I mean, a lot of it is just diplomatic tittle-tattle.
I think there's a certain blindness in that description. Pardon me, and I'm not being personal here. That's a very common description. First of all, to go back to the earlier releases, for example, 400,000 documents on on Iraq, the most recent one, which I was associated with at the press conference in London, that revealed 15,000 civilian deaths that had not been reported earlier, that were in the official reporting, which, by the way, had been saying falsely throughout that they never kept body counts. That turned out to be false, and the number was 15,000 higher than any of the press had ever reported, bringing the total of actually reported deaths to about 120,000. So although the figure is not as great as Vietnam yet, actually that's a great underestimate, because those are only the reported deaths.
But this is a much broader release, including the strategic sites that are most important to the US. What public interest is served there?
I don't think that most of the tittle-tattle that you described really needed to be out. I don't think the editorial judgment there by the Times and others was what I would have made. But on the other hand, what I have learned from these personally is rather quite startling, in fact, namely cables from Ann Patterson, the then ambassador in Pakistan, that the U.S. has been for some time engaged in offensive ground operations by special forces in Pakistan. We're in a ground war in Pakistan. Now, the Pentagon has specifically denied that as recently, I'm told, I read, as August, namely saying that we are only there training Pakistanis to train other Pakistanis. That untruth is of extreme importance. I would say, from my own experience in Vietnam, moving into covert ground operations in another country, like Laos or Cambodia, is a prelude to large-scale incursions. And moreover, in this case, threatens the stability of the Pakistan government, which could give way to a fundamentalist government that controls nuclear weapons.
One last question, Mr. Ellsberg. I'm interested if you think there's a worry that actually things might go the other way. I mean, in the administration, they're very frustrated that they don't think they can, in existing legislation, charge Julian Assange. Don't you worry that actually this leak will make things harder in future?
That could happen, because, and it is a worry of mine, it depends on how people react politically to this. I think there is a desire in the United States to have the kind of Official Secrets Act that Britain does have, which would make this clearly illegal. We don't have that because of our War of Independence and the First Amendment, which has precluded us from having an Official Secrets Act. This, I'm afraid, could go in the direction of bringing that about, so which I would not like to see. I think they'd like to go further and have the kind of controls that China has over its internet and over other things, and I think there is a war on the internet going on right now. But that depends on us to a large extent. In this still democratic country, do we allow that backlash, that reaction to happen? I'm hoping and working that doesn't happen.
Daniel Ellsberg, thank you very much. And that was...